Hello there, and welcome to the Thinking Fellows podcast. My name is Caleb, and I am joined by my father, Dr. Scott Keith, and Dr. Adam Francisco to continue our very preachy "Why You Should" series on the Thinking Fellows. The Thinking Fellows is brought to you by the 1517 podcast network of shows. You can go to 1517.org/podcast to see all of our shows there, and of course, 1517 is more than just a podcast network. You can go to 1517's homepage to see daily blogs, preaching helps, videos, conferences, a publishing house, and so much more. If you enjoy the Thinking Fellows, I bet you will find something over there that you would like or find useful either for personal use or use in your congregation. Okay, guys, why you should. And we've been doing a total of one episode in this series, and we did why you should read old books. We did it as a transition from Lewis, who made a pitch for reading old books once himself, and I think in this same vein, we're going to do a couple more episodes, I think on topics that are related. I don't know if you would see it on the surface at first, but they're all about acquiring knowledge, about methods or forms of knowledge acquisition and knowledge dissemination. And in that vein, today, what we're going to do is why you should or should not go to college. Of all the sort of explicitly non-theological or historical topics that we've done, this might be the one where we have like the most authority to speak. I think in part because from my side of things, I've recently gone to college.
Caleb's like, I've gone to college.
I've gone to college.
I know all about this. I feel like you overly emphasized, too, on the intro to this episode, as we maybe critique going to college, you were like, and I'm joined by Dr. Adam Francisco and Dr. Scott Keith, two men who have gone to college.
Yes. Well, so I recently graduated from undergrad and a master's program.
University, Irvine.
And I would disclose, we all have the same undergraduate degree. So our residential college experiences were all at the same institution. So maybe our views on college are tainted by that. So that can be out there.
Did you win any awards with your degree, your undergraduate degree?
I sure did, all of them.
Did you really?
I was so it's not called the same thing anymore. When I was there, it was a degree in religion, and I had a minor in philosophy. Now, there was calling it a degree in religion is kind of funny because I think the extent to which it was a religion class or course of study and not a Christian theology course of study included the one world religions class I took.
Yeah, the one I took too.
Yes. So that's what made it a degree in religion. I think the idea was that it was more sort of transferable to master's programs everywhere.
Yeah.
But, after the year after I graduated, the nomenclature changed. It was theology and theological studies.
And that's what I have is, and those we're kind of getting in the weeds here of our introduction, but those are two different degrees.
I need to know what kind of awards you guys won, because you say you had the same degree, but let's test.
I got the senior award religion.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't eligible for a lot of other things because I was only there 2.5 years.
Did you get?
I did
the
have
award for languages, Caleb?
I did not. I don't remember I didn't go to graduation, so I don't remember what I.
That's right.
So bad.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I would love to talk about the reasons for that on this episode, but as a pitch for the why and why not. But no, the awards I got were Summa and then Honors Scholar.
Oh, I had Summa Cum Laude too.
So.
Yeah, we did get the darn. I thought I had one up on you.
So yeah. No,
what did you think you had that we didn't have?
Well, because I had that award in theology or biblical languages. I can't remember which one. And then the honors stuff and with honors.
So I took the semesters of Greek and Hebrew that I had to, but that's all I did. But what I did was 2.5 years of Latin. But because most of my Latin I had to just kind of do independent study with Mark Brighton, it didn't qualify you for any extra award in languages. Because they didn't have a Latin program back then.
That's interesting. Yeah, and CJ,
like they do
CJ
now.
has that now.
You just had to buy Mark Brighton lunch.
So outside of college attendance, the other reason that to loop back to the introduction here, why I think the Thinking Fellows can speak on this authoritatively is both of you have worked in teaching and administration positions at universities. Not so you've been on the faculty side. Adam, you were on the faculty side for a long time at CUI, and now you're on the administration side of things at Concordia Chicago.
And I do want to clarify for the sake of the fact checkers out there. That Adam was actually like full-fledged faculty. I was always adjunct.
Yeah,
I taught a lot for an adjunct.
And you've taught both master's and undergraduate level as an adjunct.
Yeah.
And then you were full-time as an administrator in the housing department, which actually...
I was associate dean of students, to clarify.
Which is interesting because that gives you a perspective from not only like the education-wise and why not, but like even the residential-wise and why not.
Correct, yeah.
So
I've got some real thoughts on that.
And the only reason I bring up my recent attendance is because I think most people asking this question are one of two things. It's your 17, 18-year-old who's going, and it's actually their parents who are probably worried about footing the bill or their child's future and stuff like that. And for most parents, assuming that you're, planning things a little better than my dad and I did, have your kids not in the middle of your undergraduate degree, but probably 5 to 10 years after graduation, which would.
I asked Adam. I texted him the other day. I'm like, "Do you know this guy? Supposedly he graduated the same year as me." And Adam's like, "Yeah, I know him." And I'm like, "Why don't I know him? Was I that much of a jerk?" And Adam texts back, "Dude, you had children." Yeah. I was like, "Oh, okay."
So if you had your kids 5 to 10 years after you graduated, that would put you, 23 to 30 years off of having gone to college before you have to start asking that question again. What it looks like, 23 to 30 years later is potentially massively different than when you went. And so asking that question, your own experience in college may not actually be reflective of what goes on there
but
now.
I do think, certainly you have a closer perspective, and I mean, when did I leave there? 2015, 2016.
Yeah, you guys do. Yep.
So I have that recent, and Adam is currently the associate provost at Concordia University of Chicago. So he's got some of that more recent perspective too.
Yeah. So let's just let's start off with a basic set of questions, I suppose. What in your two opinions, what are like the primary motivating factors that you understand that people who do attend college use to justify that attendance?
There's a couple.
And then we can get into whether those are good or bad or...
So there's the person, as rare an animal as this person is, there is the person that goes for the sake of the education. In other words, they usually know what they want to do in the world, right, after they get out. They have a particular field of study that's interesting to them. They've probably done some work in this field of study already in high school and over the summers and whatnot. Let's take history, right? Adam used to teach in the history and political thought department at Concordia University in Irvine. A lot of those students, I'm sure, came in already with an interest in history, some background in it, some reading in it, because they were good students. And they were there primarily to get to be educated in the field of history and political thought in this case. And because that's why they went, they were usually very successful. They took classes, they did well in the classes, they paid attention, they asked pertinent questions, they sort of made the information not just sort of synthetic but organic to them. And by the time they got out, even though they didn't have master's degrees, lots of these students were already very competent historians for the level of education that they had. And that's sort of, and I think one of the problems we face in our culture is that when we say hey, so-and-so, my child got into X, right? It's supposed to enliven in the people with whom you're sharing that information, that picture that I just gave you. Mm-hmm. That they were interested in a field of study, they applied to a school that was known for that field of study, they got accepted into that field of study, and they're going to be really into that field of study and do really well and come out, I'm going to do air quotes here, come out quote unquote experts, at least for their level of education in that field of study, or at least ready to become experts by virtue of applying to master's programs and on and on.
Or employment or whatever.
So if I were to like name students, that's like student one, or you might even call them the Platonic form of student. So other than that Rod used to say that next to the Platonic form of student in the eternal Platonic realm lies the Platonic form of procrastination. But other than that, I mean, that's kind of like when you say university student, that's sort of what you're supposed to think of, right?
Yeah, but I think what most people are picking up on here on you're supposed to is that that's not really reflective of the reality of most students.
But I am still unwilling to say that it's
non-existent.
Non-existent.
Right. No, I knew plenty of students, or plenty of handfuls of students who
He's
knew
like, okay, I knew a few students
who were there for explicit purposes. I think you could almost tie into that some like at the universities we've been to. There are some church work students who are there not for like academics, but for getting a specialized education for their job placement.
That's student two, in my opinion. Do you agree, Adam? Do you agree with my student one assessment?
I do. I mean, I would add more to it. I mean, I think it is that there are some. So in my own experience, when I got out of the service, I was originally just gonna, I was looking for jobs in diving. I was considering scraping hulls in Waikiki to make a living.
Like Keanu Reeves on The Replacements.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, but it was really hard to get a job in Hawaii if you're a haole, a white person. So I moved back home in St. Louis, Missouri, and I had zero plans. I was thinking about doing commercial diving, going to like a underwater welding kind of thing and doing that. And then I just sort of haphazardly, when I was out in California for a conference, and now I know probably some of your listeners will judge me for this, but you can just stop. I was in California at a vineyard conference, like the charismatic. I was into charismatic stuff. I knew
what you were going to say and was judging you prior to you uttering the words.
Well, I was out there, and somehow, I don't remember how all the details. I think my mom sort of orchestrated, because she's a German, and she's a mother, and that's what German mothers do. She orchestrated some meeting between me and a administrator at Concordia University, Irvine, and we met for lunch. He took me on campus, and in like an hour or two's time, convinced me that I needed to do this.
To be young again.
And I was freshly out of the service, 24, I guess I was, and I'm on this beautiful campus in Southern California, and it's summer, so there's not a whole lot of people around, but there are some beautiful women around.
I was going to say
and I'm like, it's close to the beach, and I should do this. And I had picked up this interest in theology and philosophy and so on, and I said, well, I should study this. But I had there was no telos or end to it. I just was like, hey, I'm out of the service. I got the GI Bill. It was nothing back then. It was basically beer money. But
it was beer money.
I got a package, a financial aid package that was affordable for me. And so I went, and like right from the get-go, then all of a sudden I was there for the right reasons, because I was just learning stuff that I didn't think I would be able to learn. My first class, again, coming out of sort of being an enlisted guy who spent most of his time cold and in the water around submarines picking up radiation, I'm studying Hebrew, my first class. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm learning how to read chicken scratch. How many people can do that in the world? I just thought so. But I didn't have a destination in mind originally. Eventually, I thought I might go to seminary. That was a bad idea, because as my wife said, I'd be a terrible pastor. But so there are those there's like
if you can't pastor podcast.
But so. Yeah, if you got an end in mind, so like think of, if you want to be a public school teacher, you've got to go to college.
Well, to me, that's sort of like that's like form number 2, right? That's the college as educational trade school, right? That there still exist some careers.
I only mention that because there's somewhere in between 1 and 2 where, so that was the 90s when I went, and there still is, I think, this but it's a little understood a little differently. There's this understanding that if you're going to be successful, if you're going to, that is, you're going to get a white collar job, a job where you don't
They call
you don't
them,
run
they
the
call
risk
them
of
thought jobs these days.
bot jobs.
Thought, brain work.
Oh, never heard
Instead
that.
of hand
That's
work.
because I'm out of touch. But there was this understanding that if you're gonna climb the socioeconomic ladder or whatever, however we want to describe it, that you will go to college. And there was sort of an implied. I remember this growing up in high school. There was this implied assumption. Is that I don't know if that's redundant or if that's the right way of putting it, but that those who do what we'd call blue collar jobs, carpentry, plumbing, electrical work.
Back in
those
our day.
Yeah, it was like those are you
Back
don't
in
want
our
those
day,
jobs
Sonny.
because you might have to work too hard. You know,
you don't want
might,
to end up like
For not enough
him.
money.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was the assumption. What a bunch of horse
Well,
hooey.
okay, but hold on a second. I guess I want to just kind of finish this idea, though. That
Sorry, I interrupted.
no,
It's because it's noon.
I know.
1
Yeah, I know.
and I've had a
It's-
little
It's
bit
5
of
o'clock in Europe, so.
There's a biblical passage on this, though. At Pentecost, is it Peter?
Yes,
people
yes.
look at them, he's like, "We're not drunk. It's too early."
Yeah.
He's like, it's only 10 a.m.
But I've only had a little bit. I'm just no. I'm,
Somebody,
I just feel
excuse
strongly
me,
about
sir.
this."
It's 5 in China. No, but I think you're right. And the only reason I brought up sort of the type of student, I think Caleb asked the question, was why I brought it up. But beyond that, there is a so let's say there is a number 2 type, which is sort of to get the degree you need to do the job, right?
Uh-huh.
There's crossover there for sure. Like you may go to a place because you're going to get a teacher ed degree to become a teacher, but that's your program and your actual major is again history. And then you get really into history while you're there because you have inspiring professors and, you just find that you have a love for it that you didn't know you have. That's totally a thing. The third type of student that I would say is kind of the one that you were just starting to talk about, which is they're going because that's what you do to be successful.
Economic security.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, when that's why you're going, it doesn't matter the program that you're going into as long as it's not philosophy or theology.
Or gender studies.
I mean, trust me, you tell like a person in my generation, you tell like your grandpa that you're going to college and majoring in philosophy, they're going to say, why didn't you just major in underwater basket weaving? It's going to be about as useful. But these days, I'm convinced, since I recently listened to a podcast that made it sound like Space Force is maybe an actual thing, that if you want to join Space Force, you should be a philosopher. But beyond that, my fourth kind of student, which is the one that I actually think universities are currently full up with, that just drives me crazy, are the students that go there and they don't know why. They don't know why they're there. It's possibly,
They know.
and it's very much seen as like grade 13 and 14 rather than university education. They're there because their parents said, you're going to college. And they're like, well, I don't know what I want to do. And they're like, well, you're going.
Yeah.
And so they go,
You're going,
or you're
an
using
implied,
college-
I'll be disappointed.
Yeah.
Or you're using college to justify extending your athletic experience.
Right.
Even though it might be at a college, there's no way you're getting into the NFL or the whatever the leagues are
You
out
could
there.
I think you could also describe this as buying you time before you have to become an adult, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
Extended
buying,
adolescence.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
buying you that time.
And this is reflected, trust me, from somebody who did student life for too long. This is really reflected at a small liberal arts college like the Concordias, reflected in the parents' expectations of the student life staff while the students are there. In other words, this extended adolescence things, like, you're almost supposed to know where they are at 10 o'clock every night, for Pete's sake. And it's frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, we had
What's the Latin, Caleb, for the parentis?
In loco parentis.
In loco parentis, yeah.
Yeah, that college takes the place of parent, the
Yeah.
parents.
And
Until the parent's mad, and then they let you know that they're really the parents.
Yeah. Oh, and you can see that colleges. I think a lot of colleges have fallen into this role, like you said, through the student life stuff. Even I know you reformed it after I had already been through it, but like the intro class, the INT class that I took on my coming in before you reformed it, thankfully for the students who came after me, those reforms I hope stuck around there. The emphasis was mostly on things like, I remember, I won't name this person, but a professor who had the whole auditorium of us freshmen saying, like, at college, you're going to learn how to do your laundry, write a check, interview for a job. He had a whole list of things, and I was stupid enough to raise my hand. And he said, yeah, what is it? And I said, why would I spend $36,000 a year to learn things that I already know how to do? Yeah.
Caleb's like, I've had a checking account since I was 14. Yeah. Thank you.
Well,
would you like to see my investment portfolio?
You need Rachel Francisco as a mother because you'll be doing your own laundry at age 6.
He did.
I was doing it.
He had Scott Keith as a father.
And so I was, the university on my, first week of school was telling me that the reason I was there was to learn to do life, like to become an adult, things I already knew how to do. Yeah. And, I had the awareness, and I think many students there did, because, I knew I met these people, to go, is this what they think is worth $40,000, $36,000 a year? I mean, incredible.
So I'd say this. We also are sort of recounting the private liberal arts college experience, right, which I would acknowledge is uniquely different from from sort of like the state school. Think large, several, 10,000 plus institution, traditional undergrad student institutions out there. But the thing is that even, and this is anecdotal on my part, but most of the students I talk to, high school students who are thinking about going into college, in fact, I can't think of maybe one or two out of the 100 or so I've talked to in the last 3 years, are planning on going to some private liberal arts college and having sort of this experience. The data on this is also, it's somewhere in the high 60s, low 70s% of graduating high schoolers that go into college, as opposed to like the 30s when Adam and I were young. High 30s, and that's been going up steadily ever since. But the problem is it's not that many graduating. It's not in the high 70 percentile graduating. And most of this is happening on the backs of student loans.
And 4-year programs have, I think the last study I saw, the majority of students become 5.5 to 6-year programs as well.
Exactly. It's still taking loans every year to do it.
Yeah. And they get the loans, for those who haven't been there, they get actually more expensive if you go over the 4 years.
That's
so
right.
the interest rate goes up. And so a lot of these students...
But the payments get deferred no matter what while you're still enrolled in a college. And so you kind of have this amorphous amount of money out there that you're maybe quasi-aware of. If you're somebody like Caleb, you're really aware of it. If you're not somebody like Caleb, you're probably... it's this thing that may or may not ever hit you, and it's out there. I mean, that's sort of the issue.
I'm still paying loans.
Yeah, raise your hand if you still have student loans in this room.
I'm still paying loans, yeah.
For those who can't see, that's all 3 of us.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Yeah. Sometimes I want to go and strangle somebody who encouraged me to do this. Just kidding.
But the thing is that I do still think there's a value for a substantial number of high school students coming out of high school to go to one of these private liberal arts colleges. I just don't think you should be taking out massive amounts of loans to do it, because the reality is, if you're taking out large loans, you're doing so as part of like these systems that admit almost everybody, but really only give aid to people that are still in that sort of top 20%, and if you get
an aid to where you're not at the loan amount, if your parents haven't like set up some sort of account to pay for it, is probably in the top 5%.
Now, I would say, like for instance, at Concordia University in Irvine, and I'm sure CUC to some degree, you can get, like if you go to these schools with the intention of just getting the best education on the planet, you can get an exceptionally good education. There are exceptionally well-qualified faculty members. I don't know Concordia Chicago, but at Concordia University in Irvine, there are,
in Chicago,
in my opinion, some of the highest level faculty that you will get anywhere. But you'd have to take their classes intentionally. You'd have to. I watched Coach Carter the other night. You'd have to sit in the front row. You'd have to ask questions. You'd have to do your reading, and you'd have to engage the material. If you do that, you will get. I mean, with some of these professors, you'll come out of a bachelor's degree at the education level that a lot of people come out of a master's with.
Yeah.
And doctorate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Given the state of doctoral programs today.
I think that's true.
And if you do that, it might be worth the money that you spend to do it. I would still not pay full pop, but
if you're that good of a student, you can probably you maybe came in with high school, or if you didn't, you maybe could transfer in to somewhere with an aid package that makes it more
to be
affordable.
fair, like I raised my hand on the who has student loans. To be fair, I got a very good financial aid package while I was at Concordia
I did too.
University
I took student
in
loans
Irvine.
to pay for the apartment because I had a kid
Yeah,
and a wife.
The student loans are my fault because I had a family and I lived in Irvine, California.
Yeah,
So.
me too. I had an aid package at Concordia Irvine, to be clear,
Yeah.
that made it so that I would have had to have minimal loans.
Yeah,
like
I would have had to
minimum
have almost none. But at the end of the day, but that's a wholly different situation. Should you go to college? I think Adam said the assumption when he and I were young that you just kind of had to was absolutely accurate. Like some people will say, I think of this all the time myself. I'm a fairly handy guy. Like I can build houses and crap. And
Seen you do it.
and I sometimes think to myself, well, why didn't you just do this? Because I literally, even though I worked on construction crews in high school and when I was 18 and 19, it really wasn't something that anybody ever looked at you and said, you should do this for the rest of your life. You're really good at it. You should get even better at it. And you should own your own business doing it and make a lot of money at it. No one, oh my gosh, like when I was 18 years old and roofing houses, no one ever said, get really good at it, get your own crew, become a millionaire. They're all like, "Ooh, boy, when do you get to stop doing that and go to college?" And it was like,
I mean,
so that's what I don't. That's the part of this conversation that I don't like. So I would never say don't go to college, but I would say college isn't the only thing you can do after high school.
No. I think in my generation, there's a little more awareness of that. Obviously, the statistics tell you that most people are still going to college. I do think that even the ones who are there are aware that it is not the guarantee of economic security that it maybe was even in the generation before you guys, more so than it was for you two, that those jobs, white collar jobs were higher paying. They still are to an extent in particular fields, but because
they are, I think, over the aggregated lifetime.
Yeah. But what you learn is that somebody who is works hard, is willing to learn sort of the intricacies of either an academic field or a particular skill, is willing to take risks and things like that, can do very well outside of white collar work. Like, for an average student, I think undergrads get $80K of loans, and the total cost of my education before the aid and the loans would have been like $130-something thousand.
That's just a lot of money.
If you took a $130,000 business loan and started your own roofing business, like you said, or electrical business, you bought a couple trucks, you hired a guy for a year, and you were good at it, you could make more money than I'll ever make.
It's just, I think that the reason the statistics are still like they are is because, listen, 70-ish%, maybe a little less, are going into undergraduate education. They're not all finishing, but let's say I don't know the actual data anymore, Adam. I think it's probably high 30s, mid 40s that actually finish.
I didn't know it was that low. I think it's a little higher than that.
Is it higher? It could be. Yeah, I used to be in those persistence committees, but I'm not anymore. So I'm not in committees anymore, which is glorious.
I don't even know how many I'm on.
I mean, I know
It's
while
so sad. I'm getting
I
depressed
know while
now.
I was at Irvine, when you graduate, they send you like that, like there's some level of data that you can access about it. And I know that there were conversations all the time about increasing it because it had gotten lower.
Yeah, so it was fairly low when I was at CU Irvine. It could be higher now, but let's say it's 60%. Whatever. I don't really care. It doesn't matter. It's not every 18-year-old that was a roofer that goes out and starts a roofing business and becomes a millionaire.
No,
It's probably
no.
the data on that is probably much less than the average college student, right?
Yes.
So, given that if I would have just stuck around being a roofer when I was 18 and not started a business and just kind of did that manual labor my entire life, I probably would have always capped out at about 50,000 a year. Whereas I think, 10 years out of college, most people who have an undergraduate degree are making at least like 60,000 a year. And so that's why I would guess the aggregate is high, but it's not a path in a society where, in a lot of places it takes over 120,000 a year to make a decent living. It's no longer a path to wealth in the same way that it was. You may still be able to make more money than the average person who didn't go to college, but I wouldn't go to college just for its path to wealth. I mean, I will stick by the best reason to go to college is because there's a field of study at that university that you want to study, and there's a faculty there that you think would inspire you to know more in that field. That's the number one reason to go, because you're then gaining something, whether you make sort of the qualitative argument that it's worth it or not, you're gaining something that no one can ever take away, which is the knowledge that you went there to get. Mm-hmm. But if you didn't go there to get that knowledge, then you can talk about the value of the degree and everything.
I think, I would look back fondly and with pride and still enjoy the ability to interact with all this stuff, having like learned Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, even if I had like completely changed lanes after graduating and went back to selling cars or something. Like that would be...
I always said the same thing. Yeah. In fact, I did other things.
I do value what
outside of the field of religion and theology. I did other things for more than a decade.
Yeah.
And I still found them very valuable. Mm-hmm. Were you going to say something, Adam?
Well, I'm just listening to all this, I've got all sorts of mixed feelings, because I'm in higher ed, so I want everybody to go to college and spend top dollar on it. But
wow.
And I do think the college experience, if it's an academic but also a communal experience, I think would be the right way of describing it, is very valuable. But I'm going to say, if the one reason not to go to college is if your reason is just to, as we said earlier, to extend your adolescence. Now, most adolescents aren't thinking in those terms, but if it's to get away from your parents so you can smoke more weed, or you're going to a college that gives you as some now are describing, a safe place to explore your gender identity and all that stuff. If it's something other than the life of something connected to the life of the mind, do not go.
I think if you're saying that, we should I think you're right. Most 18-year-olds aren't thinking in your terms, Adam, and maybe they can go have that fun.
I got a little more to add though. Can I butt in?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
go for it.
If Scott, you remember you read? I don't think I read it. I think you gave it to me for a little while. Rory was his first name. Is a team guy, SEAL team guy, wrote the book The Damn Few, I think it is.
Yeah.
Who, I think he was connected with that movie Act of Valor, but he talks about compulsory military service, and he was kind of, I think, for it. I don't know that I am for it. I'm certain you aren't for it, because freedom's a little bit of people have the right to be free. But if you want to go and experience life, experience diversity,
right,
learn to love your neighbor, and make money while doing it, and picking up some pretty awesome skills, learn how to make your bed in the morning, get up early, be forced into an environment where you're comfortable living in a way that you're accountable.
You're a push for enlisting in the military.
Yes.
Well, I am. Or something, but but I've got something inside of me that says right now is the worst. Because I'm dealing with this with my son. The worst time to enlist. I mean,
when you
war is looming. Yeah. And have you seen the commercials for the military? The Marines haven't fallen for it, but the Army, the Navy, I'm sure. Apologies to Air Force people listening to this, but I'm sure the Air Force have all fallen to this woke. I can't say what I want to say, but at the same time. It doesn't have to be that. Just why not, rather than going to, if you're not sure what you're going to do, or that you're not sure you want to go and learn some stuff, spend 3-4 years learning with people who have dedicated their lives to pursuing these sort of fields of inquiry, why not spend some time doing something with your hands?
I will.
Or in your community.
For $40,000 a year, 100% teach your 18-year-old child how to be an adult over the course of 4 years. If you want to send your 18-year-old child to me for $40K a year,
where are you going to put them?
I will. I can rent a house in Sugarloaf
Okay.
and keep some money still.
A tent in the backyard, dude.
Yeah, housing not included, just like at a college, right? It's $40,000 tuition, and then they have to pay the housing, and I'll find a place for them to rent. I will teach them to become an adult in 4 years, guaranteed. I mean,
I'm going to compete with you and say, give me 2 years
yeah.
and 20 grand a year.
Oh.
Oh, come on. Now you're just cheaping yourself out there.
Not only will they learn to be adult, they'll learn to choke people, build stuff, change their oil, replace,
Oh, that's what I mean. I mean all that stuff.
Okay.
I think all that stuff's really important, and I'm not saying it's a place as a college to teach it, but I think it is sad that you have all of these sort of mind workers coming out of colleges who are otherwise, I don't want to be mean, but useless. Sort of in real life practical stuff, even to the point of being scared of what in the old days used to be one of the reasons to go to college, which was so that you could come out, get a job that would pay you well enough that you could support a family. And now, you get to college, and the thing that can I tell you one of the things that killed me, since we're now just doing a bitch session, most about working at Concordia was the number of students that when you'd be having a great conversation with them, get to know them a little bit, and eventually in the course of the conversation, they'd refer to themselves as a kid.
And that drove me nuts.
And some of them are 22, 23,
Yeah.
And referring to themselves, I'm just a kid. I'm like, no, you're not a kid. Like, I had a kid when I was younger than you. You're not a kid. Yeah. You're a man. You're an adult. And that was right around when the hashtag adulting was getting popular and stuff. And I'm like, this is insane, because this was just stuff that you did. And I think where I'm going with this is that I think college as a reason not to learn or be competent/confident in those other just normal life skills is crazy. One of the things I had some of the students in that class that you hated read, Caleb, was I had them read Shop Class as Soulcraft by Matthew B. Crawford, which is, again, he's a University of Chicago PhD in political philosophy, who doesn't argue that people shouldn't go to college, but he kind of argues for them, like working for a semester. He did all sorts of things. Like, he'd do construction, electrical, auto mechanics, whatever. Work for a semester, go to college for a year. Work for a semester, switch trades up at this point. Go be a plumber's assistant for a semester, go to college for a year, and do it that way, and sort of earn your college money as you went while learning life skills. Yeah. And I've probably told the story on the podcast a million times, but when he graduated from his PhD, he got a job at Washington think tanks, hated it, hated the thought work that he was doing, and quit and opened a BMW motorcycle repair shop in Maryland, and then wrote this book. And now I think he doesn't do motorcycle repair anymore. He just collects his money from writing bestsellers.
Yeah.
Doing thought work.
Yeah.
So but he, in that book, I guess my point was, he never argued for not going. He just argued for learning both sides of things.
And we could say even there are alternatives for the student who maybe needs to buy a little of the extended adolescence, but also is there was nothing in high school, and it might not be their fault or their parents' fault, that inspired them to pick up a field, who should probably consider something like the junior college, right? You can live at home. Your parents can provide your campus life experiences through maybe starting to charge you rent and making you do your laundry if you weren't already doing those kinds of things. You could still work a job and all that stuff. And you can go to a 2-year college where you can see if something attracts you, if something inspires you. And my dad and I were just talking about this the other day. There are junior colleges where there are fantastic faculty. You are not always getting like high school teacher 2.0.
My
no offense to high school teachers. I'm sorry.
My nephew came up with two of his buddies the other day. They were doing some 4x4 and out in Holcomb Valley and camped and froze their butts off. And so he came over to see if they could sleep in the cabin. instead of
At
freezing.
what time? Early in the
It
morning.
was during the day, but
No,
they made it through the
they
night.
made it through the night,
but
yeah.
they froze their butts off. And he's like, they were going to stay one more night. He's like, can we stay at the cabin? I was like, yeah, sure. But so I took him for a ride over there, and I'm riding around with his buddies, and we go over to the cabin, and the kid notices some of my classical books on the shelf and theology books on the shelf. And he's like, oh, so we get in this discussion about this. And he says, yeah, I had at my junior college in Simi Valley, I had a professor that totally inspired me. He was a University of Chicago philosophy doctorate,
Wow.
who was also a Roman Catholic. He said, and we learned all sorts of things in that philosophy class, like all of Aquinas' proofs for the existence of God. And I'm like, that's amazing. And he probably paid, because he's a California resident, California high school graduate, to get this professor, right, that inspired him and sounds like he was an amazing prof.
$125 a unit.
Yeah, probably paid $100 to $125 a unit for that class. So he probably paid, some $375 $375 for that class.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a gold mine.
That is a gold mine. I mean, don't discount that.
Yeah, and
If you're an average to slightly above average student, instead of paying $60,000 a year to go to one of these private liberal arts colleges that's not going to give you a lot of aid, do a couple years at a quality community college and just really test your aptitude for it.
And you might be able to, if you do 2 years at a community college, you could probably work at the same time, at least part time, and you might be able to, and you might find you would prefer just to work too. I mean, there's something about this, since the veil of college or no success or college or starve has gone away. There's now a way to sort of test the waters of both at the same time, and I think some of this is like, I do think there are people my age who understand some of this, like that. I think most people in my generation and slightly younger know that college is not a guarantee. I still think a lot of the parents are, even slightly older than you guys. For you guys both had kids relatively young. I think there's some of that it's like, my kid is not going to get a good job without this. So if you know somebody like that, I think, you may never, listeners of the Thinking Fellows may never be asking themselves this question again: why should I go to college, right? Or why you should go to college. Chances are somebody who is asking this question: family, a friend, somebody with kids in high school, those parents that you're contemporaries with, or maybe one day you'll be asking it for your own kids if you're not already doing it now. And it's hard to know because you haven't been there in the job market. If you've had employment for a long time, you don't know what it's like, and so it can be scary. And college is kind of an answer, like the gimme answer to settling some of those fears. But I think there's a lot of options to explore, and if your child is passionate, encourage them to find a school that specializes in that passion.
Yeah,
and go for it.
Seriously. Like I recently told a friend that if their child wants to go to somewhere like Concordia University Irvine, there's some really good reasons to go there.
Or Concordia Chicago. There's some really good reasons to go there. A lot of them have to do with the faculties I know that excel, and there's a lot of them at CUI and Concordia Chicago.
Hey,
Adam, I just don't know that one as well.
Adam knows that I recommended
I know you at Concordia Chicago.
I recommended my niece to go to Chicago. She's there.
Listen, we did this already.
Yeah,
his sister-in-law.
Oh, yeah, my sister-in-law, not my niece. Oh my gosh, I'm dumb. Yeah. I'm really dumb.
Yeah.
No, she's there and she's thriving, and actually she's like one of the model students.
And she knew what she wanted to do, and Concordia Chicago had a program aimed at that goal.
Especially at the Concordias, if you go into one of the church worker programs, it'll, in a lot of ways, it's like they say that one of the greatest benefits for going somewhere like Harvard are the business connections you make while you're there that last the rest of your life. You could say the same thing if you're going into sort of a church worker program about any of the Concordias, that you're going to make connections there that in your career, in your calling, will last you the rest of your life. And that's not to be sneezed at. That's important stuff. I wouldn't know you if it weren't for our time at Concordia.
Imagine how horrible your life would be.
I know. It would just be so different and awful.
You'd be wandering around the
Yeah.
streets of
And I think,
L.A.
You know,
homeless.
the benefit takeaway of this situation is, and I think a lot of people know this, but maybe for somebody who doesn't, we can settle some fears, is that college isn't the only opportunity for that. So if you're on the fence or your child's on the fence, like, I think on good authority you can say that those types of opportunities to make connections, to work hard, to live a fulfilling life aren't exclusively gatekept by a college degree.
Correct.
Well, guys,
All right.
awesome episode, a lot of fun. We will do sort of one more episode about, like semi-related to gaining knowledge or how knowledge is transmitted on the next episode. And then I think coming into Holy Week and Easter and this church season, we are going to switch to some theological topics again after the next episode. If you have ideas for the Why You Should series, you can go ahead and send those via the contact form on the 1517 website. And if you would like to support the Thinking Fellows, you can go to 1517.org/donate or follow the top link at the beginning of every show notes. Thank you for listening. We will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.